So I'd like to aloha and welcome everybody here today for our second annual Lunch and Learn speaker series. I'm Diane Bowen-Coleman, and I'm the State Human Trafficking Abatement Coordinator for the Special Investigation and Prosecution Division of the Department of the Attorney General. I am thrilled today to introduce Kunani Dreyer of the Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction Center as our speaker today. And I'm going to introduce him by reading his bio. But first, I just want to give a little warning. My internet appears to be unstable. So if I happen to freeze or not be able to unmute or even access the chat later on, and I'm not able to mahalo everybody and close this off, Kunani has been advised to go ahead and do that for me, and I will follow up with everyone via email. But fingers crossed. Okay, so welcoming Kunani. Deputy Director of Programs at the Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction Center, Kunani is a leader within the LGBTQIA+ community. Kunani has worked in the field for 20 plus years, providing HIV and HCV testing and prevention services, smoking cessation, and most recently, working with individuals experiencing houselessness. Kunani has also provided capacity building and training with a focus on harm reduction throughout Hawaii and the U.S. affiliated Pacific Islands. Most recently, Kunani has developed and managed 2 new programs addressing houselessness on Oahu for H3RC, or the Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction Center. Kunani is a graduate of the University of Hawaii at West Oahu with a bachelor's in public administration. Kunani is a recipient of the 2025 Suzanne Richmond Crum Award from the Hawaii State Department of Health. Congratulations, by the way. And the 2023 Circle of Harmony Award, recognizing him for his 22 years of HIV prevention work. Kunani continues to build and foster community relationships in both his professional and personal life. Thank you, Kunani, for being here with us today.
So aloha, everyone. My name is Kunani Dreyer. I am the Deputy Director of Programs here at Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction Center. I think what's even more so relevant to this is I am a lifetime member of this community. I am Hawaiian Chinese white. I identify as māhū. I use he, him, oya pronouns. Depending on the space I'm in, I'll even say I'm a member of the LGBT community or specifically gay. But with my cultural identity and my upbringing in my family and community, māhū works very well for me. So I'm going to go ahead and, I would just want to say thank you to Diane for the invite to come and talk about our community today, because when we think of sex trafficking, a lot of time, or human trafficking, a lot of times people don't necessarily think it impacts our LGBT community or our māhū community, but it does. It does. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And yeah. So I just drank a rock star and I have only 1 hour and a bunch of slides. So I'm going to talk a little fast, but please don't hesitate to just interrupt, or not interrupt, but, unmute and say, "Hui, I have a question." If you want, we also have time at the end for Q&A. Okay. So real quick, Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction Center, we are the merged entity of the Life Foundation, Hawaii's oldest and largest AIDS service organization, and the Child Project, which is the Diane, I think we need to mute you. There we go. I got it. And the Child Project, which was our statewide syringe exchange program. And, we merged 7 years ago because our communities needed more than just that. So this is our mission. I'm not going to read it. If you're not familiar with us, check us out on our website, www.hhhrc.org, for a great resource, especially for our disenfranchised communities, our LGBT, our māhū, our substance using, behavioral health, all of these different communities, we have a lot of services for. So, okay. So we are at the intersection of criminal justice, HIV and Hep C care and prevention, mental health, substance use, houselessness. So most of our people we work with all come in through one of these doors, but we know many of them have situations or things going on that intersect. So if you would like, in the chat box, you could put your name and your pronouns and what do you do, or where do you do it and what do you do, so people in the chat room can see. Okay, really quick. I'm just curious. I'm asking, how many of you know somebody or may have worked with somebody who identifies as māhū or LGBTQIA plus? If you could raise your hand. Okay. Oh, I see lots of hands go up. Yeah. So, I ask this question always when I do this training. And if I'm in a physical space with people, I will look for the person who doesn't raise their hand. Because and then I ask that person who doesn't raise their hand, if I ask them, how do they know? Right? How do you know? Not everybody in this world is like me. I walk into the room and you can, they go, oh, right? They have suspicion already just because the way I walk or my mannerisms. Then I open my mouth and they say, oh, yes, for sure, right? They have confirmed it the minute I open my mouth and I start talking, right? They say, oh, māhū or LGBT, whatever they want. But they've come to the conclusion and confirmed that I am from the community. But not everybody carries themselves like me. Not everybody puts their identity of being LGBTQIA plus or māhū out there so that it's in your face, right? Not everybody does that. For some people, this piece of their identity, of their true selves and who they are, is something they may keep secret or keep just to themselves or to a very small circle of people. So we always have to just kind of be mindful of how we speak, the words we use, the things we say, that kind of thing. And, be understanding that's, out of the blue, 6 months down the line, somebody might say that you're working with or something like that, that they're from this community. Yeah. Okay. So objectives, right? Increase understanding of cultural family values as Native Hawaiian māhū community, understanding of the differences between the cultural and the Western views, right? Colonization and all of this on our community, and how they differ, and a little bit of understanding of the intersection of our LGBT community and sex trafficking. So, um, yeah. Disclaimer. I tell this every training also. I'm not here to recruit. We're not here to, I'm here to give everyone, I love these trainings because it gives people a little bit of insight into our community and a little bit more understanding of our community. And so that especially if you're a service provider of some sort, if somebody comes in to see you or is coming in for a service you provide, you have a little bit of more understanding of who the person is in front of you, so that you can do what you need to do from a non-judgmental space, a little bit more understanding, that kind of thing. So thank you all for being here today. But again, no recruitment. We have enough on our own. Okay. So let me just start off with a little bit around, I was doing some research into our LGBTQ plus community and human trafficking to see what I could find. What is out there? What kind of data is out there? That kind of thing, right? So when we think of human trafficking and just who are the victims in general, right? Or who are the potential victims or are victims within human trafficking? Vulnerable populations, right? When we think of poverty, unstable housing situations, history of trauma and substance use, people of color, immigrants, right? We see higher numbers of people who fall into these different populations in these different communities amongst individuals that are being trafficked. But when we think about it, LGBTQ plus are more likely to be exploited when they're LGBTQ plus and experiencing poverty and unstable housing, of course have higher history of substance use and trauma than their cisgender or their heterosexual counterparts, right? We know this through some of the data that we see. So even more so when we think about this, right? Our LGBTQ community, especially our LGBTQ youth, right, who may experience higher rates of physical or family violence because they're just not being accepted for who they are within their own home, within their own families, right? We see discrimination. And when we think of discrimination, there might be fewer employment opportunities, right? Fewer opportunities in general, whether, in life type of thing, which can lead to increased economic instability or homelessness, right? Unstable housing, things like that, which then gives our youth, our LGBTQ plus youth, be a little bit. There's higher desperation to just meet the basic needs of life, right? And so, how do we do this, right? We turn to um survival sex. We turn to these different things, these different ways of being able to get what we need just to survive. So a lot of times we'll hear people talk about how our LGBT community can be, very engaged in have a higher sex drive, all of these different things that all kind of play into this arena when it comes to survival sex. I'm doing the survival sex and engaging in survival sex just so that I can survive. It's not because I want to and I enjoy it, right? But it's because this is the only way I'm able to get the financial or the means to have the things that I need just to meet my basic needs, right? There's a big difference, and people get that. A lot of times I hear providers and other people kind of get this piece a little misconstrued and a little misunderstood of why somebody may be engaging in um, sex work when it's really survival sex work. It's not just because, it's Friday night and I want to make some extra money or something like that, but it's survival sex. I want to be able to eat. I want a warm place to sleep, that kind of thing. Those are the things that lead our community into this arena, right? And then when we think of the T in the LGBTQ, right, our transgender community, especially our male to female transgender community, right, there's a whole lot of discrimination when it comes to be just transgender individuals in general. It's in the news every day now, right? So even more in the forefront, but even so discrimination, it's harder to transition from male to female than female to male in the sense of the outer the way people look, right? And so there's a lot more effort and sometimes a lot longer gender affirming process. So a lot of discrimination and stigma coming when you're a transgender girl. Um, there's increased needs and less resources when it comes to transition and gender affirming care and what do I do? So I'm gonna turn to again. Um, Survival sex, right? That kind of thing in order to, which then creates this gateway to be recruited into the trafficking world, right? And then resources are very limited and restricted for our LGBT community, especially nowadays. Okay. So again, searching for data, it's like data, there are a lot of challenges when it comes to data and our community. One, there's still, when you think about the world in general, there's 65 countries still criminalize LGBTQ identities and same gender relationships, still criminalized. So of course, people who are involved who live in these places of the world aren't going to report anything because they can't even say something because it becomes get in trouble because of just who they are, right? Their true selves. But data is hard to collect. Our LGBT community, they'll stay in the closet or don't report what's happening to them, right? Because due to fear, being outed, maybe as a result of coming forward. It could be their experiences from engaging with law enforcement and other entities. There's a lot of mistrust, right, within our community about just, things wouldn't happen to you if you didn't do this, right? Like it's your fault, that kind of thing. But just not wanting to go forward because it's like, well, nothing's going to happen. Um, And then again, perceived as engaging in commercial sex on their own, which then just takes us away from the perceptions or the reality of I'm engaged in these things because it's survival sex, right? So there's a lot of finger pointing sometimes when it comes to our community. And if you didn't do this, this wouldn't have happened, that kind of thing. Um, or we're the instigators, that kind of, and so there's a lot of mistrust when it comes to seeking out support or services or, why should I even bother type thing. So data's hard to find. Right. Data is really hard to find. I was looking even in Hawaii, I found data from 2024 and it said 55 cases were reported, but I was trying to see what the breakdown was and just things like that. But it's hard to find. But just know if someone is from our community is coming forward to say this has happened to me or this is happening to me, believe them. Because by the time that individual has gotten up the courage to come and see you to say, this is happening to me, they've gone through a whole process. They're not coming to you just to make a report because for whatever reason, things are really happening. It's really serious and they're coming to you for that support. Okay. Then I put some resources in here. They're going to send these slides out to you folks. So you'll be okay. Okay. I'm doing pretty good on time. Okay. Any thoughts or questions before I move into a little dive into our community and things like that? Okay. Silence just means you think I'm fabulous. But all right. Anyway, let's talk about culture. And what is culture, right? When we think about culture, when we think about groups of people, right? It's an integrated pattern of human behavior, right? The things that bind us and connect us, the way we do things within these groups, the way we talk, the way our practice, our beliefs, our values, our customs, our courtesies. So I like to tell people when I think about culture, right? There's a office culture here at HHHRC that when I come to work, this is how our community, our office functions. And then even within our department, there's a little culture, right? And then I leave here and I go hang out with my friends for dinner or whatever. Within that group, we have a culture. Then I go home to my house and in my family, there's a culture, right? This pattern of how we operate, how we function within our family, right? So all these little groups that we belong to, these circles, there's a culture within that group, and we adapt ourselves to function as within these little these ways and these cultural practices, however you want to call them, with each group. And we're very flexible and we can do that, right? Because it's like, I know and it almost comes natural, right? And culture can change over time, right? Especially if, I think of family dynamics and the culture within a family, right? Maybe the matriarch of the family passes away. And so there's a new person and then there becomes a whole new, way that we function within that family and in that family unit, right? Because dynamics have changed. That's culture, right? So again, the dynamics of culture and how we function within a group, and they become just almost accepted, right? Just naturally accepted. So we used to talk about culture in a way of, I'm culturally competent. I attended that 1 hour lunch and learn with Kunane, who talked about LGBTQ plus and māhū culture. And so now I am culturally competent. Well, I want to just let you know, even myself, who is a lifetime member, almost 60 years, believe it, of this community, cannot say that I am culturally competent within the LGBTQ plus world. Because within our community, right, there's the young LGBT, there's the young māhū. I am far disconnected from that group of people, right? Yes, there are some things that will be across all ages or all communities, that kind of thing, but it's different. So, and I even talk about in the same sense, My friend Jeannie Makahoa, who lives on Molokai, always talks about her and I. She always says, Kunani, we are village queens, right? I grew up in Hau'ula. I still live in Hau'ula. It's a beautiful place. It's very country. We very village, right? That kind of thing. So compared to, or when you think about the way community functions and operates here in Honolulu in the big city, right? So she always tells us, Kurani, we are village queens because it's different. It's a different way of life. It's a different culture for us, right? So it's we no longer like to say culturally competent, but I do love to say having cultural humility. So when we think about cultural humility, this lifelong process of learning, self-examination, our own knowledge, our own skill set, our own understanding of ourselves, and then our own understanding of others, right? And who they are, what what does their world look like? If we can be open to sit and learn and understand about the person who's sitting in front of us, then we are going to have this and come from this place of humility. We will get to really understand who this person is and what does this world of their own culture look like, and how do these things impact who they are and the world they live in and how they interact with others, right? And so that's where culture humility comes in. All right. So intersectionality, again, the same concept. Every single person who we come across that we know that we're going to learn about or meet and in life, we all come from different things. We all have different backgrounds, right? Where we work, our education, our ethnicity, our gender, orientation, our age, all of these different things. We're all different. And that's something that we always need to remember and honor. Okay. That's my little brief culture definition. Culture and history. Let's talk a little bit. And when I say culture and history, I'm talking about here in Hawaii and our Native Hawaiian culture. And when we think about that, we're going to talk a little bit about māhū. And even when we think about this whole concept of family or ohana, you know, we can see this play out within our LGBT community. But, in Hawaii, ohana is everything, and family doesn't mean only by blood, right? This is a picture. There was about 110 of us at this retreat, all coming either māhū, LGBT, there were cisgender, transgender, straight, gay, all of, just a mix from all islands. Many people came, didn't know each other on Friday, but by Sunday, everybody was family, right? We all connected. We found the things that connected us. And that's how we live here in Hawaii, right? And when we think about who we are as a people. Ohana and family doesn't only mean by blood, right? I grew up in Hau'ula. When we were kids, whoever's yard you were standing in at 6 o'clock, it's the house you were going to eat dinner at, that kind of thing, right? And everybody watched out for everybody. Everybody was family, everybody was auntie, everybody was uncle. If you were being bad, you got lickings. And then when you went home and you told your parents that, oh, auntie gave me licking because da da da, they want to know why, then you got licking some more, right? It was none of this. My kid is always right, right? It's a community. So anyway, little story growing up in Halula. All right. So we have the terms LGBTQIA plus. We keep continuing. I like to say legitimate qua sometimes, but within our community, especially our Pacific Islander community, our Native communities, that doesn't always resonate, but we're seeing more and more research being done within our community. And so amongst the researchers and some people especially on the West Coast, we got together, we came up with a couple terms that we use of our own that reference, but queer and trans Pacific Islanders. So you might hear the term cutie pie. But then also understanding that indigenous identities of queer and trans people do not always fit these Western labels of gender identity and sexual orientation. So we came up with MVP FAF, and let me break that down for you folks. MVP FAF, right, is Māhū, Whakasaleva, Palopa, Fa'afine, Akawahine, Whakapapine, right? Whakaleti. These are all cultural terms, olelo from their own language, their own culture, that describes someone who, I'm going to use it, Māhū, who embodies both the male and female energy, right? So Felicia Brown Action was doing her PhD research and started to really come across this whole um, conversation and realization that not all Pacific Island, especially um, amongst in the Pacific, they didn't connect to LGBTQ, right? Because Māhū doesn't describe who I want to sleep with or who I'm attracted to sexually, right? And that was the same in all the cultures as she was doing her research, right? So a lot of these identities are erased because of Western institutions such as religion or Western cultural practices. We started to see more and more of these identities kind of being really erased, watered down, that kind of thing, right? Colonization, right? This whole homophobia and transphobia. People didn't know what to do when they saw a Māhū person coming along because they just thought, oh, we're here to sleep with all the boys or whatever. And that's not the case. So, in research and across the community, especially Pacific Island, you're going to see these terms now, cutie pie or MVP bath. And that's really us reclaiming who we are. This is just a little map of the Pacific. Okay. So in Native Hawaiian in Hawaii, right, there's these three identities, right? There's Kane, Wahine, and then there's Māhū. There's Māhū. That's me. Okay. So when we think of this terminology, right, we have aikane or noho or moi aikane. So depending, I don't know if you folks watched episode 3 of Jason Momoa's little film, right? His little series, episode 3, I believe it was, opened with a lovely scene of aikane, and the community went in an uproar. But Aikane is when you have a same gender relationship, whether it's platonic or if it was more intimate. So, back in before colonization, before Western influences, there was more kapu or rules around who you could sit and eat with than who you could sleep with, right? There wasn't all of this stigma, shame, all of these different things that got attached to relationships until after Western influences, right? So aikane is a relationship, same gender relationship. Mostly our ali'i had aikane relationships. Partly is because they had to protect the lineage, right? There was that, and it was just something that was open to do back in the day. That's a whole nother conversation. And then Māhū, and this is where it gets tricky, right? Because when we think of Māhū, this person who has this embodies both energies, masculine and feminine, right? And can go back and forth and can do whatever needs to be done, right? When we try to explain these cultural identities, these cultural practices, these cultural things in Western language, we lose things. So these definitions here are from even our own Hawaiian dictionaries, but they are written out. They don't talk about the energy, masculine and the two different being Kane and Wahine and the energy of all of this, right? Of Ku and Hina and the role of who Mahu was and the importance. But it talks about how a man addressed who assimilates his person or the manners as like a woman born with two sex organs, homosexual, right? These are all to appease or to try to explain to someone who's non-Hawaiian who and what Mahu is. And you can't do that. You lose the essence of what that word is. And that happens with so many of our things, our cultural practices, our concepts, our values. When we try to explain Hawaiian to non-Hawaiians, translation gets lost, right? And that's what happens with Mahu, right? So when we talk about the history of Mahu, my coworker or my colleague Kathy Kapua, who worked here a while ago, has before did a lot of research around the history of Mahu, and tried to go as far back as she could to find, documentation. Because, everything was Olelo, right? We just told the story, right? Olelo story and things like that. But she found this little write-up from Reverend Cochrane Forbes from the 1838 talking about how he came across a māhū, right? A man who has never dressed in male costume from his birth, now labors under conviction, right? I told him that if he would be a follower of Jesus, he must make no reserve, but we must be willing to sacrifice everything. Poor fellow, he has a hard conflict with his pride, but the sinner must be willing to do anything for Christ. This is a perfect example of how Western society came into our world and started to tell us we were wrong. My soapbox moment. We were here first. Accept it or move on. That's the bottom line, if you ask me. But we were told we were wrong. And it wasn't just māhū, right? Our language, hula, all of these things. As a result of colonization, all of these things started to disappear, right? Or became bad. And so we need to really look at our history of where things disappeared and why. Anyway, off my soapbox moment. So māhū is a cultural term. We like to say it's to be privileged, have the mana, the energy of both kane wahine, male and female, right? We were part of the fabric of society. We were valued, respected. We were caretakers, healers, all of these things. We came with kuleana, with responsibility, right? I knew I'm the youngest in my family. I'm māhū. I knew my kuleana in my family was going to be to care for my parents as they aged. And I did. That was mine. And I knew in my heart, I know I was born into this place to do these things with my family. And I like to say I was gifted the opportunity to do those things, right? Māhū, caretaker. And that's who we were in our community, right? In our families, there was a place, responsibility. So māhū is an identity that's rooted in indigenous Kanaka Oiwi knowledge systems, right? Spiritual responsibilities served as specific communal and familiar purposes. Māhū extends beyond gender identity. My friend Kekoa Rosa, who always talks about this too, he said, being māhū has nothing to do with who I want to sleep with, right? It's tied to this larger cultural framework. Right? It's historically tied to kuleana, right? We have roles, we have responsibility as māhū, right? Māhū is not Hawaiian non-binary. It is not Hawaiian transgender, right? It's its own indigenous cultural identity with distinct origins and practices. We were here first. I'd like to tell everybody, right? We carry the energy of ku and hina, right? The male, the husband, the wife. We're able to carry both. We're respected. We're an asset. We do both. My coworker, Maddie, likes to say we're the secret weapon. We can change your tire and we can go home and make sure the family is all taken care of, all in the same day, right? We can do all of these things. Whatever needs to be done, we jump up and we do. Okay. My good friend Hina always talks about kuleana and kulana, right? Our role. Kulana is role, kuleana responsibility. And that doesn't just apply to māhū, but in Hawaiian society, everybody had a role. And when you know your role, you know what your responsibilities are, right? When you know your role, you know what your responsibilities are. My role as caretaker in my family was meant I was going to take care of my mom, take care of the house, these kinds of things, right? That was my role, my responsibility. My role at the agency, I know what that is. I know what my responsibilities are. And then same thing in the community, role and responsibility, right? When we know our role, we know our responsibilities. It's so simple. We need the whole world to listen to this. Okay. So over the years, we've seen a shift in how we are as māhū seen and respected and things like that over time, right? So during the whole protest with what was happening on the Mauna, we got this call saying, the men are here, the women are here, the kupuna are here. Where's our māhū? We ended up doing this group, creating this group of, it was called Mana Māhū, and there we were up on the Mauna all the time, right? We were in the front line of the marches, of the protests, right? We were part of the discussions that were happening. And since then, we've seen people give us our place at the table, give us the respect, want to know what our thoughts are when it comes to different issues, right? Knowing that we need to have māhū in all the discussions. So, so some of this we talked about the cultural term, but growing up in Haula at Kahuku School, right? Māhū, I heard somebody say māhū. I said, oh, I'm going to have to fight, right? Or somebody's going to throw a rock, right? It was so negative, right? That kind of thing. We didn't like being called māhū, right? And it was always, māhū was always usually used towards somebody who was either transgender, right? Going from male to female, or very feminine boy. You can pick whichever one you want. For me, they both fit. But that kind of thing. But we didn't like being called māhū, and it was usually always used negatively. And so even our community didn't like the word. But over the years now, we trying to empower, right? And so now people are saying, yeah, I'm māhū, right? We can be proud of that. It took a little while. Back in 2000, we started using the term māhū wahine or māhū kane because it took the negativity out of it. But now, over the years, people are okay. Our community identifies and has embraced this word of being māhū. We could be proud of being māhū. So Hawaii has a long history of māhū, over time, I don't know, the Glades, depending on how old you are, right? Used to be this place in Chinatown, a club that had all these beautiful entertainers. But history has a bad place for us, but has a negative history in our community. This is kind of the Stonewall of Hawaii. But the Glades was our safe space where our community would go and would be on Mauna Kea Street, Mauna Kea and River area, an hotel, that block. That's where all the girls hung out and performed, and it was a safe space for the community. They ended up having to wear these buttons, and they're coming up, I think, on the 30-year. And there's an anniversary coming up in March that we're going to have all these events around for the Glades. But they would have to wear these buttons because the military boys would go down to Hotel Street, right? Hotel Street was historic red light district. So Mauna Kea towards Waikiki, that was where all the cisgender women hung out. Mauna Kea towards River, that direction was where our māhū community was. The boys would come, the military boys would come, they would hook up with the girls. When they got busted, they would like to say, oh, I didn't know. They knew what they were looking for. And so some judge said, wear this button that said, I'm a boy. So again, continued with this Western thought process of it's wrong and all of this thing and being punished for who we are, right? If you Google the Glades, there's a long history, a beautiful history with this place. It closed in 1982. I was 16, but I used to sneak in through the back door because that's where I wanted to be. Catching the bus from Damien High School one year. It was crazy. Anyway, that's different stories, different meeting. So, but again, thinking of family by our ohana, but we have our biological family, we have our hanai family. Hanai, this whole concept of hanai within our culture is big, right? About who's going to take it, who raises this child, who takes care of this child. Well, in our community, we have a hanai community, right? So, our chosen family is one way to think about it. But, our biological family doesn't always understand, right? This is where we can see some of the violence or things like that happen within the biological family because they don't understand or agree with who their child is, their identity, right? The family doesn't know what to do, how to support them. So it's ready to, I just don't agree with it, right? Because Western influences or whatever may be happening. And so that's the biological family where they have troubles with, even if they're supportive, they don't even know how to support, right? So the Hanai family, our chosen family, better understanding of who we are as LGBT or māhū, right? They can provide us that support. They can walk us through things. And sometimes the only source of safety for especially our youth, right? Okay, that's my quick and dirty for māhū. Very important. Māhū is we were here first. If you take anything away, whether we have a role, we have a place, we were here first. And it has nothing to do with who I want to sleep with. Okay. Western culture, right? I hear the alphabet mafia. I hear all these different terms now, right? Legitimate qua, I like to say, so LGBTQIA plus or lesbian, gay, bisexual. We have continue to add to our list. But what I want to say here is these are labels, right? When we think of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, that kind of thing, those are labels that would to check off a box that were designed through the Western world for us to check off the box of who we are, our sexual orientation or our gender identity. Again, LGBTQIA plus has nothing to do with my role or my responsibility in my world, in my life, right? So really understanding that there's a big difference when we think about our cultural identities versus these Western labels that I like to call them, because they're just boxes I check to tell you who I sleep with or what, that kind of thing, right? So big difference. When we think about gender and this is elementary school that they use in schools, right? The gender unicorn, gender identity, right? How I identify male, female, right? Gender expression, am I masculine, feminine, somewhere in between, right? And I like to tell everybody this will change. If you catch me at 10 a.m. in my office, you're going to get, or in a presentation like this, you're going to kind of get a little bit of subdued expression. If you're in my house at 10 p.m. on a Friday night or in my patio with me on a Friday night at 10 p.m., a whole different thing, right? So expression will change. You know, I see a cute guy walk into the room. Oh, I get really quiet, right? Because I don't want to scare them that quickly, right? So expression will change depending on the setting, right? Sex assigned at birth, male, female, maybe intersex, right? Someone born with both. And then our sexual orientation, who we're physically and emotionally attracted to, whether that's men, women, both, other genders, right? Who we're attracted to. So all of these things play into that piece of the identity. This is Western concepts of who we are, right? So identity and orientation, I think the most important thing is to know that one doesn't determine the other. Right. I know some, men that are straight, heterosexual, but they're kind of a little more feminine, right? That kind of thing. One doesn't impact the other, right? Changes on setting with gender expression. Gender non-binary, this is the umbrella term. Someone who identifies, uses they, them pronouns, doesn't want to say male, female, right? They're not on this binary. They're not checking the box either or, right? So they don't necessarily follow what everybody else thinks you're supposed to be or who you're supposed to be as male or female. Yeah. So transgender is this larger umbrella. You have a trans man or trans woman, trans masculine, trans female, trans feminine fall into the binary, right? They're kind of headed and have a goal on either side of the binary, this of who they are as a person, individual. Non-binaries are the people who live in the middle, right? But both these identities fall under the bigger umbrella of being transgender. All right. So again, everybody's going to look different. This is interrelatedness of terms and how, if everybody in this Zoom call did this little worksheet, like put their X's where they are, everybody's chart would look different. And that what makes it beautiful, right? So these are my X's. I was assigned I'm male at birth. My gender identity, it's never been all the way at male, right? But again, male and identity and expression, if you catch me, depending on what time you catch me, those X's could move. And I've always been attracted to men, so my gay. But if everybody did this, everybody's chart would look different. That's what makes the world a beautiful place. And then someone who's gender non-conforming, right? They're not even going to check the boxes. They're going to give that paper back blank. It's important to understand relationships within our community, right? So here's the individual in the middle, right? Male, female, someone who's transgender, and they could be in or gender non-conforming, and they could be in a relationship with someone who male, female, transgender, gender non-conforming. And a lot of times we used to label relationships. I remember growing up, if there was a guy in a relationship with a māhū or a transgender woman, they would automatically label the guy as being gay because they would just assume or label the transgender girl as still being male, right? So again, society putting on their own expectations. But in reality, when it's up to the couple, to the two people in the relationship to define the relationship, right? So a male in a relationship with a transgender woman who identifies as female, their relationship to them is heterosexual. It's not up to us to decide that, right? And a lot of times that's part of the barriers when it comes to us wanting to report things or talk about things with service professionals, law enforcement, whatever it is. There's a lot of this assumption where, oh, you're transgender, you're māhū, you're really a dude. You should be doing this or whatever, right? These kind of concepts that keep us from seeking out support. Okay, what time is it? I'm going to do this in 3 minutes. So issues for us coming to seek support, right? Stigma and shame. We shame tell you who we are because you're going to judge us. And whether you are or not, that's been our experience. So we don't want to do it, right? We think not at my dining room table, right? And this is where it's okay for us to have the person, the friend that could be LGBT, that could be māhū, just don't let it be my own kid. The whole different set of circumstances or expectation when it's our own kid, right? So not at my dining room table. And I've seen families broken apart because of this, right? They're friends with me. It's okay for me, but don't be my own kid, right? Culture. A lot of times in culture, we don't talk about things. We don't share about things, right? Asian cultures, we don't talk about certain things. In some of our Pacific Island cultures, like if we think about within our own, like Micronesian and some of these cultures, and you only speak with the same gender, so sometimes it's hard to share what's going on, right? Our people don't know that the services, our people don't know that when I go and see, I just gonna pick a name, I see Dennis is going to be so nice to me, right? We just kind of assume sometimes that it's going to be a bad experience, so we don't go seeking, right? Substance use, intimate partner violence, and suicide all higher amongst our LGBT people than amongst the heterosexual counterparts, right? These rates. So again, we're experiencing all these things where sometimes the out we don't necessarily know is trafficking, but we get lured into that arena because the things that could be promised to us, right? So barriers. I'm going to be judged, not being understood, or I deserve it, right? If you weren't out at 2 a.m. trying to, engaged in sex work, you wouldn't have gotten beaten up. But I was out engaging in the sex work because I'm hungry and I just wanted a warm place to sleep. Last night was freezing in Hauula, right? So I might do things in order to have a warm place to sleep, right? But being judged or not being understood or I deserved it is what we experience when we come to share what's going on, right? Instead of asking the question, well, how do we find you a warm place to sleep? How do we get you housed? What is your situation, right? Not being addressed as we present, right? My middle name is Richard. Please don't call me that. But I show up as Ray. I live my life today as Rachel. My ID still says Richard. And even though I tell you my name is Rachel, you still call me Richard because it's on the ID. It's not needed to call me that, right? Use Rachel. Your systems can have Richard because that's my legal name still. But hopefully there's a place that you can write Rachel down so that whenever I talk to anybody, you say Rachel, right? Yeah. We have no problem calling somebody Bubba. We have no problem calling somebody, Ikaika or whatever, right? That kind of thing. We have no problem using people's nickname, but all of a sudden it becomes an issue when a transgender individual wants to use a different name. Myths that all transgender girls are going to be sex workers or that all young gay boys are looking for a sugar daddy. Not true. Not true. Not true. Guilt by association. If I go into H3RC to get screened for, to do HI sexual health screening, that people think I'm doing something I'm not supposed to, right? We are sexual beings, honey. Come get tested, come get screened, know your status, and enjoy yourself, right? Lack of training. Not everybody knows how to work with our community, right? So provide a safe space, address the people by their chosen name and gender, use their pronouns, people first language, right? Someone who engages in sex work, someone who uses some substances, that kind of thing. Standardize your questions. Ask everybody every question. Don't just ask certain people certain questions because you think, I don't need to ask about how many male partners they have, right? If I'm doing a sexual health screening because I think this guy's straight. And I know he only sleeps with women or something. But when we ask everybody, when we tell them, I ask everybody every question, it takes the stigma out of that. No, we use slang. If you don't understand what I'm saying, like I went out pooching last night, I wasn't walking my dog, that's sex work, right? Ask the question, what do you mean, poochie? Tell me about that. We're going to tell you. You don't have to talk māhū to us, but we will tell you what the slang means, right? Focus on our need and not our gender identity or sexual orientation. If we're there for something and it has nothing to do with whatever, don't ask about my partners when it has nothing to do with it or whatever it may be, right? If you have an LGBT staff member, that's fabulous. We can spot them. Or if we know, we can spot the person who we can feel that energy that will make us feel safe, right? Have that person. Respect confidentiality. It is a small community. We will say, don't go down to that place because they tell your tea, right? That kind of thing. Referrals. If you're going to refer somebody somewhere, make sure they're as fabulous as you. Because if you send me to go see, I'm going to pick another name here, Shanacy. If you send me to go see Shanacy and Shanacy is mean to me, I'm going to be upset with Shanacy and say, don't ever go see Shanacy. But I'm going to also then say, oh, it was Tracy who sent me to see Shanacy, so don't go see Tracy either, right? These kinds of things, right? Make sure your referrals are fabulous. Manage your own discomfort when we tell our stories about, especially in the sex trafficking world, right? We're talking and human trafficking. We're talking about doing things that we don't want to do, right? Manage your own discomfort. Be client-centered and check your privilege because what's easy for us to do to maneuver and navigate through the various systems can be very difficult for our LGBT, especially our transgender communities, to maneuver through these systems, right? Because of all the judgment and everything. So just check your privilege. Understand that what's easy for us is not always easy for everybody else. Okay. Ask the correct questions, especially around gender, sex at birth. Second question, current gender. That will let you know if the person's transgender. What do you enjoy? Non-stigma questions. And then ask yourself, do you really need to know? Are you asking because you māhū? Right? Names. Stick to the preferred name when you can. Pronouns. It's not hard. My name's Kunane. I use he, him pronouns. What's your name? What pronouns do you use? And just use them. And if you don't know, just ask, what pronouns do you use? We're going to tell you. If you misgender somebody, you don't have to just apologize and then go forward. Don't make a big deal because you make it awkward. And here again, another prime example of our culture, right? Oya, ya, kona, kana. These are all our Olelo Hawaii pronouns. They have nothing to do with our gender. They actually are just referring to whoever we're talking about or whoever's in the conversation. Again, ahead of the game. And then Western people came in and messed things up. No. Okay. These are things that will be in the slides, again, that I just kind of rattled off. So I will go through. I'm going to stop here and say, policies. Have policies in place. Right? Names, pronouns, that kind of thing, because then it happens across the board and people are just kind of doing what they want to do. So that my experience, every single time I come into your program or agency or see you or see someone else there, I have the same positive experience. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and I'll pass this back to Diane.
Thanks, Kunani. Really appreciated that presentation. Shared tremendous information of value with everyone. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? I think I saw 6 hands raised. So if you're comfortable unmuting, please come off mute. Otherwise, you can put your question in the chat, and Kunani and I will monitor the chat. Anyone with any questions? All right. So while everybody is thinking of what they might like to ask Kunani, while you have the opportunity, I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining us here today and for sharing this space. This was very informative. I'm so grateful that Kunani could join us. Want to thank Kunani for sharing your ike, your mana'o, and everything else. Really appreciate you participating with us this year. And a couple of announcements. One of them I did put in the chat, and I will put the link in the email, but the presenter for the first Lunch and Learn needed to reschedule. So we rescheduled for January 23rd, which is not on our website just yet, but we hope to get that updated soon. In the meantime, it will be the link will be included in your email. And that is human trafficking, off and online sexual exploitation, re-victimizations. And tomorrow we have the executive director of RISE joining us, Carla Rise. She'll be talking about the unsheltered youth and moving our most vulnerable beyond the risks of exploitation. Then coming up next week, Wednesday, it is a long weekend with the holiday on Monday. We have Dr. Danielle Giroux from HPU, and she will be speaking on understanding and responding to male victims of child sexual exploitation. So we hope to see you all tomorrow and next Wednesday and after that. So we have presentations through the end of the month. If anybody has any questions for me, please feel free to drop it in the chat or shoot me an email, and I'll open it back up to the floor for questions for Kunani. Okay, it is 12:59. If there's no further questions, or we will close this out and hope to see you at another one of our presentations. Thank you all. Thank you so kindly for being here. Thank you, Kunani.
Aloha.
Aloha.